Hello and welcome everybody to this year's first edition of the Chief Architect Network Live. Very excited to be here with my co-host as always, Mr. Brian Chambers. He'll be taking us into a little bit of an introduction here in a moment. And as you folks get settled in, let me tell you a little bit about the network. So we are the Chief Architect Network, which is really a Fortune 500 collection of architect leaders at that scale, right? So whether you're the chief architect for a billion scale business within a larger organization, or the chief architect of a Fortune 500, or you lead a domain with 10 or more architects, you might be a chief architect. You might belong with us. So if that's you, join us. Go to chiefarchitectnetwork.com and then apply to join your peers. It's a no-cost, volunteer, nonprofit organization, and it's really just a great way for us to learn best practices, share and widen perspectives, grow as leaders, develop talent, and drive outcomes. So very excited to be here with you today. Brian.
Yeah, good to see you, Grant. Glad to be back here again this year doing more of these live events and engaging with the community. So we're excited to kick off today by bringing in a guest who hasn't been with us before. And that's Mr. Sundar. He's the chief architect at Corning. And a real quick story about how this came about is Sundar and I are both located in Metro Atlanta. So we're both part of the Chief Architect Network Atlanta community. But we also both registered for our Chief Architect Network peer program, which is really a way just to find somebody else who's dealing with similar challenges with leading enterprise architecture or a practice, sub-practice. We went through and paired people together, gave them somebody, not as a mentoring thing, but just as a way to be able to talk about common challenges, make a new friend, sometimes in the same city, sometimes in different ones, but pretty awesome program. And that's actually how Sundar and I got to meet. And actually one of the conversations we had a couple of weeks ago was about today's topic. And so we thought, hey, let's bring him on. Sundar's awesome at this stuff and just an awesome guy. So Sundar, welcome. We're super glad to have you today. And maybe tell us a little bit about yourself real quick, and then we'll jump into our topic for the day.
So always a pleasure to be in the presence of you two illustrious gentlemen. So thank you for having me. So I'm a chief architect at Corning, and I've worked in that similar capacity at other large companies like Walgreens and McKesson. I've also had experience consulting and leading architecture practices at Big Four consulting firms. So I've done this a few times, and I think I've got a couple of lessons learned that I look forward to sharing with you guys. So shall I go on, Grant? Or
yeah, one more intro thing, and we'll give people a chance to kind of read some of the thoughts you shared ahead of time here on the right. We'll also have this event is live event. It's open to all, and we always prioritize to you. We've got a rough flow, but this is a chance to really connect, get your questions answered by chief architects, and to learn as a group. It's really kind of being a part of our network. So chat on LinkedIn or on YouTube, and they'll be brought up as comments that we can address and talk through on the phone. And then for members of the Chief Architect Network, about 30 minutes in, we actually have 3 folks on right now. We'll bring them onto the stage and give them a chance to kind of interact and share their thoughts and ask questions of the expert here, Mr. Sundar. So very excited to dig in. Sundar, yeah, take us in, man. Where do you want to go first?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about some of the experience I've had that I wonder if it resonates with you guys, that you meet a CIO and then they ask some when you enroll, they ask some very basic questions. How many applications do we have in this company? And you get this kind of deer in the headlights look. So certainly then they don't know what the applications do. Is it right sized? Is our cost structure right? So a lot of times those CIOs would ask me, like, well, how could this be? How is it possible? And some of it is the landscape is not managed as a portfolio. So usually the CIO has some directs, they have a certain purview, they take care of their business, but nobody's really looking at it end to end. But that's part of where the chief architects come in. So, and in that space, they usually get rewarded for focusing on the next great set of functionality. Not so much looking back and tidying and keeping house and making sure everything is as it should be. But there's a lot of impact by not doing that. So one thing that's obvious is the cost factor, because you could, if you don't even know how many applications you have, chances are there's something in there that's not optimized. Another aspect is the more applications that you have, the harder it is to keep up. You have to patch them. And so there's chances of security vulnerability. and end of life issues with support is also a problem. And the more applications you have, when you have to make a policy change, a process change, a lot of times it's not just one application you have to go to. There's several that are supporting that function, and you have to go change them all. And related to that, if you have many applications that hold data similar to a particular function, supply chain planning, whatever, if you wanted to get enterprise visibility, you've got to integrate the data from all of those and roll them up to be able to get the view that you want. And then finally, there's the skill set issue that if you have disparate platforms, you have to do your best firefighting and maintaining them. Whereas as you consolidate, you start to say, can we get good and best practice at some of much fewer strategic platforms? So there's a lot of reasons why they should be doing this and why the CIOs would ask questions like this. But in order to do this, you have to have a concerted, focused effort, a program, and it has to have many stakeholders and many steps. And that's part of what I'd like to kind of take you through, what that kind of looks like.
Boy, you really set the stage for me. I think every challenge you talked about, are things that we're all seeing many times here. Vipin, part of the network, called that out. It's like that really resonated, Sundar. It's funny how all these different glass buildings, the problems are kind of similar.
Yeah. I have no idea what you're talking about, Sundar. Like, never heard this problem before. Everybody's got a handle on all of their applications and exactly how they serve the business. And we're all perfectly optimized.
Can I come work for you, Brian? Sounds like you got the place to work.
No, you had a big problem here. So maybe take us into like how to even start thinking about this. Like for those who maybe are resonating with every word, which does include me. Like, where should we start? How do we think about this?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of two building blocks that you want to create first. So one is a business capability model. So what that is it's a hierarchical definition of all the functions that the business has. So the point is that you want a structured way of looking at the business rather than just saying things like it's a supply chain planning system. So the way you do that is this hierarchy. So think of it like a picture at the top level, the main functions the business has: HR, finance, supply chain, sales and marketing, manufacturing, so on. And then there's underneath that are levels with more detail. So under supply chain, maybe there's order to cash. And then further, there's more detail. Under that might be like accounts receivable. So you go to the necessary level of detail where you can get the right definition of what your applications are going to be doing that's granular enough. So that's kind of one side of the coin. And the other side is you have to have an application inventory. So, we're talking about how do you even get what those are. There's a number of ways to do it. So tribal knowledge is definitely one aspect of it, one leg of the stool, because there are people doing the support of these applications. And so you can get information from them. There are automated discovery tools that can help determine by kind of pinging the network what the applications exist. There's sort of footprints of certain applications. Usually you take kind of multiple approaches like this and you kind of bring them together to say, this is what my inventory looks like. But by the way, there's like not a trivial thing to say, what is the definition of an application? That itself is something that you have to really kind of hone, because if you have something like Active Directory, is that an application or not? You can look at it kind of in more than one way. So anyway, once you get the business capabilities and you've got the application inventory, what you want to do is map the two of them together.
Let's talk about that application definition. I mean, to some people go, well, aren't you just navel gazing? But one of the things we discovered together, right? It's not the same to call, you can have three possible right answers. And just to use a simple example: Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, or spell check, right? And one of the things to consider as you're weighing that is, for every application you track, you have to maintain a whole lot of fields, ownership, and a lot of other ties for it. So that it's sort of like exponentially expensive the more things that you track, but you don't get deep enough and you don't get enough value. So there's a trade-off.
That is exactly right. Like with most things in life, it's a balance. That if you incorporate too many things, you're going to pull your hair out, saying like, "Oh, where does this belong? Where do I fit this into a round hole?" On the other hand, like if you don't go enough detail, you're not going to find the opportunities that you're really going to bring value. So we're actually wrestling with that at my company now to kind of fine tune that definition.
Yeah, maybe for folks who are in the chat, if you've found a good balance in your own experience, maybe drop us a note. We'll throw it up on the screen. What about you, Grant? Have you felt like you found a nice medium on these things in previous roles or current role?
I think it's a space you're always yearning for more. Like, I think that the biggest challenge is to level set our ambition with what the organization is ready for and what they need in the moment, because it can become an administrative nightmare. So I have found for the problem I'm after, a very nice balance for sort of the implementation, getting the data timely to be able to address it, things like application consolidation or even standard setting, just a simple first step. What do we want to be in CRM? What do we want to be using in ERP? That to me is how you really drive this thing and get people to want to actually help, is solve a compelling problem with application portfolio management. And as you're doing that, build the capabilities of the function at the same time.
So let me just build on what Grant just said for a moment, that originally the proposed definition I had said we're going to only look at business applications and not sort of technology tools. When I started shopping that around, people started saying, we have a lot of redundancy in the technology tool space at this company. So if you leave that out of scope, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunity for rationalization. So we have to be flexible. And now those things are being included. So I think that's where Grant's going, that you align it with where the opportunity is and the value is.
Exactly.
Okay. So the idea is then you work with the application owners to say, here's all the descriptions from the business capability model of what the business does. And now you and us, we've aligned on what the list of applications is. We need to map these applications to the functions that they serve. Somewhere in that hierarchy, that taxonomy, it represents what this function does, this application does for the business. So let's highlight that. That's not a trivial task, but once it's done, the next thing you do is look for redundancies. So you're looking for 5 applications doing one function. Just saying that is not a reason to say anytime you see 5, we have to get to 1. So there's a whole set of filtering, like an assessment set of criteria that you use. So one dimension of that is, what kind of business capability is it? So if it's very back office-ish and commoditized kind of a function, it's a much more likely candidate for this rationalization. If, on the other hand, it's very close to the customer model or the product type of manufacturing, there may be quite valid reasons why you need a differentiated kind of solution. So that's one dimension. Others might be whether there's technology obsolescence, so there's kind of risk that has to be mitigated. So that you go through this several pertinent criteria to analyze the opportunities, and then filter through those criteria to say, I now have a pipeline, a queue of rationalization candidates. In our case, we don't have an infinite budget. I don't know about you guys. So the next thing we got to do is to kind of prioritize and then build business cases to say, where are we going to get the funding for this? You need the mind share of the resources in the business for that change, because they're being transplanted from one application to another. And you have to have buy-in from them. So that's, once you have the pipeline, then you're looking for coordination and then and business case development. So part of this whole process too is about you want to set yourself up for being able to create application portfolio roadmaps. So if you're doing this inventory, you now have the current state of what it is that you have. You want to be thinking about, where do I want to be in 3 years? So it could be that in some cases you have 5 general ledger applications, not really much use in doing that 5 different ways. So your target in 3 years is to reduce to 1. But in other cases, and whatever it might be, product development or e-commerce, you don't have enough functionality. So you're looking to take the savings that you might have had from the reduction in one area and pump it into the areas that's going to drive the business growth. So the idea is, once you have that set up, and part of that includes, you may have heard that Gartner has something called the time model. Mm-hmm. That's a way to provide application disposition. It stands for tolerate, invest, migrate, and eliminate. Basically what it says is, which of these applications are my strategic platforms, the ones I want to keep investing in, and which are the ones that they're not long for my company. There's not much use to them. And there's some things in the middle where they kind of are useful, and for now we'll kind of be happy with it. So part of it is that on having that understanding so that you can set this current state and the future state in your roadmap. And then the goal is every budget cycle, you want to be referring to this to say, usually you don't have money just to make advancements. It's like a chess game to move towards where you want to go. Some other investment may come up, like a big SAP upgrade. You want to take advantage of those opportunities to say, how can I take 1 step forward, 2 steps forward in this whole plan? But if you don't have a plan, then you don't know where to take those 1 or 2 steps. So that's the key, is to have the direction that you want to go.
It's good. I'm curious, Sundar, like as you've done this in your current and past roles, a lot of times people are really excited about like new transformation, like, the stuff that's coming in that is going to change the business or whatever. But it's really hard to get people excited about getting rid of something that you have a few of, but it's kind of working. It's just wasteful. Like, how are you approaching that in like influencing people who own those things to get on board with this roadmap, or are they the ones who initiate it? Like, how do you deal with that?
No, it's a great question. So it's very rare when you have a leader who just knows this and has a vision for where to go because they've been burned in the past. So let's assume you don't have that. One thing is never let a good crisis go to waste, because what happens is some of these applications are so old, there's no care and feeding of them. That's because we're not doing a portfolio management effort. And then somebody hacks into them, and then there's some impact and downtime and so on. And that's where we say, well, so we're not just making this up. This is a real life problem, and that we're trying to mitigate the risk to the company. In some other cases, I've had CIOs come and ask me that I asked for some really simple change, and this application team is saying it's going to take them 6 months. And why? What's happening there? And then you have to kind of explain that we have a very complex landscape. Perhaps we don't need to have so much, but we do. And because of that, in order to make an end-to-end process change, it's like threading the needle. You got to stitch together all these different applications in order to affect change, and that takes a long time. So there's real ramifications in terms of moving the business forward too, that they feel, but sometimes it's not easy to make those points clear.
And I'm just enjoying this so much while I'm watching you speak truths we know to be the facts from our own work together, while a community of our peers is bringing these really enlightening comments. Like, if I had this little video as I was getting started down this journey on my first gig, that would have been really nice, I gotta say. Thanks for the amazing tips for the community. These are gold coming through the chat.
Thank you, Grant. And it's nice to see some old friends. I saw names flash. I'm not reading them because I guess I'm talking, but thank you all for chiming in. So, some of the concerns about this is, why is this hard? If we all buy into the concept, why can't we just do it? The number one reason is what Brian already asked about, because to get off the dime, to get this thing started, you have to build up this evangelization to say, I'm not just talking from an ivory tower. It's not just like a abstract thing. This is affecting our business day to day. And that takes time to socialize and to get people kind of on board with this. Beyond that, there are a large number of stakeholders that have to come together. So you can imagine you've got all these applications. The number of people who support those applications and have knowledge of them probably comprise half the company. So you're trying to get to a large group, and you have to do it through their leadership, so you can do it in a concerted way. So a lot of coordination required. And then there's always like these support teams. So we use, there's IT for IT tools are going to be very important here, EA tools, but also like configuration management database that we use ServiceNow. All these are very important pieces in order to, you don't want to do all this on a spreadsheet. It just gets so out of control. That means you have to get all those teams that support those platforms kind of on board and talking to each other, not just as human beings, but getting their platforms to be talking together. So all of that is sort of foundational work that's going to be enabling all of this. And of course, finally, the difficulties are that even when you get the pipeline built, you have to shop it around, because you're now a salesman saying, I need some funding to be able to execute this. And then each one of these things tend to be a business case. What I've seen in the longer term, once you get the first couple going and people say, oh, it is kind of doable, and they're staying within budget, it gets easier as you go on. But the first couple is usually a difficult slog.
I agree. And then also, success isn't permanent, right? Like, once you do the work, I almost find you have to do like a gamification challenge with all the vice presidents. Like, hey, you got to get your apps to be certified and have no blank fields and at least acknowledged complete. And by the end of the month, so now you're creating like a little bit of a game to see who can get to 100% first across the senior leaders. And they don't want to play that game more than once a year. You might be able to get 2 out of them.
So you're setting it up exactly for the next stage of this, Grant, and that's to make this a sustainable process. It's not just a kind of a one and done thing. And the first thing you want to do is to have somebody who owns the application lifecycle management process. First of all, most people don't even think about that as a term and what's involved in it, but it's about having data quality in your inventory. There's some governance that's required. Mm-hmm. And there's expectation of saying applications go through different stages in the life cycle, and we have to understand where they are and monitor it and take the actions necessary depending on where they are. So defining what this is, having somebody take ownership of that, that also is an evangelization process. Not to mention that there's a little bit more of a mindset, a culture shift, because the whole point is if you clean all this up, but you don't do anything in terms of the intake. I use this analogy: you're bailing water out of a boat, but there's a hole in the boat, more water is coming in. So, you have to take into account what that process is for new entrants into the application portfolio. And that means you have to establish standards to say, we already have platforms to do these things. Let's look at it first to see if that's going to fill your need before we go shopping for something else. That requires a cultural mindset shift, because a lot of companies have a very autonomous nature of their business units. They like to just do what they think is right to advance their goals and their targets. Here we're saying, well, we're going to partner now. So because we have something, a catalog for you, let's at least have a look. And then that is a bit of a governance kind of model that they may not be prepared for. So that takes a little while.
We had a couple questions come in. Let's see if we can jump into some of these, a little bit of a lightning round. So Karsten, oddly, LinkedIn put the wrong picture up. I'm not sure how that happened, but Karsten was talking about, hey, what are your best strategies for risk mitigation and return? And I'll try to find 2 other questions that came earlier as well.
And so I'm going to deduce that what that means is about technology obsolescence and how do we kind of control the negative impacts of that. So the part of all this work that's being done is that it sets the stage for other value added benefits. So, for example, if you have it in these IT for IT repositories, what the application inventory is, what this business capability model is, you can start downloading electronic roadmaps from vendors for their support life cycles. You figure out which of your technology stack components are going to go obsolete based on those roadmaps. Now you can tie those technology stack components to application names, and you usually have a criticality rating of those applications as well as the owner names. And the idea is before every budget cycle, you would go to those leaders, VPs or whatever, to say, here are the top 10 mission critical applications that have some technology stack that's going to go end of life in the next 18 months. So you need to allocate in your budget something to test and do some upgrades so we don't get caught, in an undesirable place.
Love it. Next question, and stump the professor, is could you share your POV on AI values? It says AI value streams into applications and tools rationalization. This is from our friend Malahat.
Yes. So we're dealing with this exact issue now. So I'll tell you what happens here. And this is what's nice, that it's this friendly community here, and it's I can be a little bit more open than I would be like talking about Gartner or something. When I talk to the IT leadership and explain basically what I'm telling you guys, Some of the development VPs said that, yeah, that's probably not going to work. And I said, well, why not? They said, well, in some cases, I don't know who owns my applications. So, I mean, there's a lot of concerns about that because I mean, my first thought was, what happens when something goes wrong with it? I mean, who do you call? So it's way beyond this that they should be concerned. But what happens is when you have a lot of outsourcing and then there's turnover in the providers, you start to get sort of multiple jumps away from the original authors and implementers. So I can see where they start to kind of lose touch. So he said, I can't tell you anything about the business capabilities of my applications, just use AI to do it. So the thing with that is like AI is really based on data. So you have to have some data somewhere that you can tap into and it mines it. So in our case, we don't have a lot of data. So I think we have to really kind of dig deep because there is some level of descriptions of these applications that have been documented. And we're going to try to tap into that to try to reverse engineer and deduce what their capabilities are. But that is going to get us probably 30% there. And we're going to need some human inventory.
That's a fun one. Next question for you, Sundar. This one from an anonymous user, it appears. But what do you find to be the biggest motivators for your stakeholders and executive team? Like, is it cost, velocity, something else?
Yeah, I think it depends on the nature of the role. So if you're talking to a business unit leader, it's all about velocity. They have a sales goal, they have P&L they want to hit, and they're saying, so if you've got issues where you're growing and you're not able to meet customer demand, you want enterprise visibility into your production capacities. How am I going to make sure that I deliver, make this stuff and get it to my customers and keep the sales train rolling? So that they couldn't care less about cost because they're saying I'm growing. On the other hand, if you have like a CIO who's probably rewarded largely on hitting a number for the IT budget and so on, then they have a different point of view and cost reduction is big. On the other hand, a CISO or security might be saying, I want to make sure that I know these things aren't being patched and I want to just make sure I fend off any incidents. So it depends on the role.
That's good. Grant, I saw a question go by a second ago. Did you want to read that one?
Oh, I was kind of pulling up some of the comments. You can remind me. I'll go to it.
It was like 2 ago.
Oh, right here. In your experience, what is the biggest challenge in balancing modernization and legacy systems?
Yeah. So, so I'm interpreting the question as that people are always interested in the next set of exciting functionality. Mm-hmm. And not to kind of look backwards and say, this thing was deployed 20 years ago and I got to change the oil.
Yeah.
So, and that's a very common concern. I think it's the same thing about this crisis thing. At some point, oftentimes those legacy systems come back to bite you if they haven't been taken care of. There's either like some kind of security vulnerability in it, or anyone that knew anything about it has retired and left the company, and then like you're left with this Jenga puzzle that you're afraid to touch because, but I need to touch it because it's so important to our business processes. That's when I think the rubber hits the road, and they're saying, "Yeah, we got to do something about this."
I love that. I want to give you a chance to kind of give us some take-home concepts, Sundar. In about a couple minutes here, we'll have some guests. This is one of my favorite things, is we bring in anyone from the Chief Architect Network that has a question or comment. I think we've got 3 or 4 folks with us already, right at that half-hour mark, which we're almost there. So for those of you that are in the queue, hop on camera so I'll know you're ready, and I'll bring you in when we get to that. And as we prepare, Sundar, why don't you kind of give us some of the main take-homes that you think are really important for us to capture?
Yeah, I think that's great, Grant. Thank you. So one thing is, if you're going to be a chief architect and trying to do this, there's about half a dozen hats that you got to be able to put on. One of them is, and nobody does this better than Grant, is evangelizing. So you got to be, it's like you're like a politician. You're going to have to do these stump speeches to all these various different kinds of audiences to kind of get them on board. And you have to commit in your mind to say, I'm going to spend a significant chunk of my time doing this. Even though I'm saying the same thing again and again, you're going to have to do it to the technical community. You're going to do it to the leadership, everywhere. So, and you have to be seen as this kind of pastor or something, somebody that's talking. The second thing is you have to understand how much partnership is required. you're going to need all these different types of people. None of them will report to you. So you're going to have to find a way to develop these relationships, not just about this. You have to develop like these bonds and relationships with all these people so that they trust you. And then you start working as a community, which is difficult to do with friends, family, anything. It's about people kind of coming together. So if you, I think, set all, and then the third thing is related to questions that Grant was asking too. You have to keep in mind the mindset of the listener. Every time you go talk to someone, they have a different point of view than you. They're not thinking about APM and EA, and they don't care. They have a world that they live in, and you have to be prepared to say, what is that world? And I need to look at it from that point of view and meet them there. So those would be my takeaways.
I love it.
Awesome.
Well, our first question comes from our very own Jason Taylor. Jason, I'm going to bring you into the stage here. Thanks for joining us. Oh, we can't hear you yet. Try that again one more time.
What about now?
We do, and you've got a very cool jacket on. Oh, we just lost our video connection to you, but we can hear you still, Jason. Go ahead with your question. It'll come back in a minute. Oh, it looks like
Did we lose him completely?
we might have lost Jason. Oh, okay. Is anyone else ready? Come on camera if you are. Otherwise, we'll keep bantering among us. All right, give him a second to reconnect here. Oh, you're back. Welcome back.
Hey, can you hear me now?
I can. What a great jacket you have on. That looks warm.
I know. I'm representing. My question for Sundar was, I think, lots of people get the value of APM. I think the question is, how do you sell the concept? It's sort of, I think one of the challenges EAs see in less mature organizations is sort of selling the value of the construct, like in an environment where maybe they haven't felt the pain yet. I think when an organization has already felt the pain, you can point to that and say, hey, guys, we need to do this because we want to avoid this pain. But in an org, maybe they haven't felt the pain yet. What's your advice for folks to sort of starting up a program like this? Because it does require, to your point, some investment, some focus, and people need to come on the journey with you. So any tips and tricks you've got in that space?
So you're absolutely right that you got to know you're like rolling a rock uphill to get these people kind of
Sisyphus.
On board. If that's what they call me actually at work. I'd mentioned don't let a good crisis go to waste, and when things like that happen, you have to point out like why it happened. But my 2 cents about this is that pain sometimes is happening, and people don't realize what the root cause of it is. Like the case that I was saying about. We can't keep up with the growth because we can't plan our capacity across these plants. Each one of them is running a different legacy application. I don't have a combined view of what all that production is. They won't be able to say that's why they're not meeting customer demand. So it's up to us, I think, to understand what is the big pain points that the company sees, and then look through each one to say, what is the root cause of this? And if you can identify this kind of root cause and then connect the dots for them to say, the reason that you can't get something that's so important to you is because of something like this, sometimes that's a little light bulb sometimes goes off.
I love that.
Great insight. Thanks.
Awesome. Nadin, I saw you on. Are you ready to jump in? Let's add you into the stage. Thank you so much for joining us, Jason.
Anytime.
All right, Nadin, looks like we have you off camera, but I saw you jump in. Wait, we'll come. Oh, here you are, sir. All right. What comments do you have?
I was going to get my cool jacket. So
We already know you're cool, man.
I expected the red hat, Melvin.
Well, this is the can. So
Non-branded.
the badge at the door.
That's right.
I don't know if the camera is working properly. Can you see me?
We do. You're kind of like, there you are. That's perfect.
Okay.
All right, now we're there.
So my comments are more, you spoke about applications. What about the infrastructure? And how and when do you factor that in? From an infrastructure cost perspective, and what do you deploy to? Is it you modernize to the same environment? What are the different types of environments you consider? And how do you plan for the infrastructure getting modernized over time as well?
Yes.
You have multiple layers there.
There are.
I may have missed it. I mean, there's only 30 minutes. You only.
It's a lot to cover. It's dense.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. We're talking about evangelization with the applications. That's hard enough. If you have to get to saying you have to modernize the infrastructure, I mean, everybody's eyes kind of glaze over because it's something that's so far distant from what their day-to-day lives are typically. So the one thing I try to keep in mind is don't overwhelm them. Because if you really told them the state of affairs of the infrastructure in the company, it's going to cost $100 million to fix everything. They just check out and they just think you're crying chicken little. So that's where the points I was making about prioritization. Understand which of the mission critical applications have technology stack components that are about to go obsolete, which may affect the critical process. And if you frame it that way, that if you have this factory that's got our most valuable product, it's generating the biggest part of our margin, and that's reliant on this type of application, which is about to go end of life in sport, now people might have a little bit more inclination to say it is worth an investment. Like a budget owner, like a P&L owner, is going to think of this as paying for insurance. And people don't like paying for insurance. I think they don't see the value in it. But if you make it a high enough stakes game, I think you can sort of get their attention.
Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Naden. Appreciate you being on the show. All right, up next, we got Farhan. There we are, Farhan. You're on mute at the moment. You have to unmute quickly. So what resonated for you, or what question do you have?
Well, I'd like to begin with a comment and say this. Wow, Sundar. Beautiful.
Right?
I hardly have any questions for you. But
it's wonderful.
On the other hand, just to make it fun, yeah, I mean, how much of this stuff, I think we know the answer to this, but for the audience, how much of the APM processes, methods, approaches do you see can be actually automated, especially in light of some of the new tooling we're seeing coming on board?
So I think there's pockets where it can be, and then other areas where it's going to be difficult. So an area where I was saying it can be highly automated is that whole technology lifecycle management process. About you got the roadmaps already in electronic format. You connect it to repositories that have this information. And then you can almost like crank out this report with the push of a button. A little oversimplified, but it's something like that. The difficulty there more is in keeping up with the data quality and the governance, which is a little bit more of a manual task that requires a lot of people. But the effort of getting the value out is relatively simple because it's all electronic already. Now, I think Malahat, there's somebody who's asking about, why don't you just determine the mapping of the business capabilities and the applications and just do it with AI? If there's no data, there's no intelligence that's going to find it. So in those kind of cases, it's a big struggle. So it kind of depends on the context. I think some cases you want to take advantage of it as much as you can. And you also have to just be aware that many people think AI just is magic and solves everything. So you have to be able to temper it without sounding condescending that you don't know what you're talking about.
We got a comment from Mr. Taylor too. He said, "Don't forget application ownership concept. That's key." Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was going to throw a follow-on, unrelated or kind of related question. What are your thoughts about? You could pre-advertise this APM initiative, this, that, the other, or you could just get started and show results. What are your thoughts about that versus without any pre?
Are you nudging us to an answer there? I think you are, and I kind of like where you're going.
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I can tell you what I did because I've been at this company 6 months. So before we even broached the idea that this is a strategic program, so today it's now like on the CIO's one-pager to say this has to be done. Okay. But when I came, it wasn't. But I knew it was something that I was going to be pushing for. So I started building the business capability model in month 2 or something, well before this work was being done. So because you've kind of been through this before, there's certain foundational things that are going to be there. So in parallel, you can do these things. You can be doing the evangelization and doing some foundational setup work, sort of similarly time frames.
Oh, really good. All right. Well, Farhan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Matt Jones on deck. We'll bring him into the stage. Hey, Matt, thanks for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Sundar, great presentation. Like, you've answered most of my questions already. Any tips for an architect who is just trying to get started in introducing business capabilities in the organization?
Yeah. So, there's so much value that can be brought there. And I think, Grant was saying this too. Where is the pain and where you can use this? So in my case here, this was about APM. But for example, does your company feel pain aligning IT strategy to business strategy? So business capabilities are like a cornerstone that can connect all of that. Mm-hmm. So if, for example, business unit leaders are saying, you're spending all this money, I don't even know where it's going, and I'm not getting what I need or something, maybe that area might be an opportunity. So my first, it sounds like you might be new in role or something, but my thought is listen for those pain points. What are people griping about? It's like gold when you actually hear people complaining, because that's going to give you the North Star of where you need to go.
I'll add something too. I think as you're stepping into this space, the capability maps, we all get excited and geek out, especially when it's really good. The worst thing you can do is run around with your capability map and try to show the business and walk them through all of it. In their own space, that's fine. Like, hey, let me show you how I'm articulating your space. They're going to be excited about that. But anything that isn't like about them specifically, boy, are they not interested. But it becomes a common dictionary. And what I was really excited about was a leader I was working with at Medtronic was so successful in influencing the capabilities into the ways of working among their peers that a lot of them had it on plotter paper in their office with the capabilities that they were looking after. So what's really nice about it is it can create a mutual sense of ownership of a space and give them sort of a leadership hat to take it into that. But you have to be careful to bring them into it in areas that are meaningful to them, or they lose the plot.
And Grant, if I could just build on this one point, because it's Grant and I worked at the same company a couple of years ago. And their pain point was they had maybe like 30, 40 flagship projects that they would launch at the beginning of the fiscal year. And they would say, like 3 months in, we realized that we both had two different projects have to like work on the same application. And now like we have to stop. One guy has to stop while the other one's like doing the work, and they're burning their burn rates and consultants. And it's a real pain point. That's where we use the business capability model. So we found the touch points between these flagship projects using the business capability model, connecting that to the applications to see where these overlaps were. The business leadership loved this. They didn't think it was possible in advance to find out where those conflicts were going to occur. And the fact that we were able to do it proactively, they saw a lot of value.
I just add one thing too, which is you don't necessarily have to start in the most important part of your business or the flashiest part of your business. Like for us in our journey, we started a lot with financial services because they had the pain that was already mentioned. And they were also like eager partners who were willing to like do the work. And then they became like an internal reference, more or less. Like they got other people that they worked with excited about it, and it kind of grew and scaled from there. So I think everything that was said is true, but like just, it doesn't have to be, the area that needs the most transformation. It could be something really basic and foundational, but you can get a foothold and you can build on it.
Love it. We're definitely taking that land and expand strategy with this. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I've been we've been chatting among us, and I've been noticing, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. We had Jason come back with a few more things. Can I bring you back, Jason, just to share a couple of those nuggets you've been talking through?
Yeah, sure. Is the mic working still?
Yep.
Yes, yeah, the mic's working.
Can you hear me?
We do.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can. Oh, good. Sorry. Yeah, the stream keeps cutting out on me. So I just wanted to mention that I think the ultimate key for some of these things, we all have these sort of tips and tricks and strategies, but you got to anchor them back to some sort of business value. And the business capability thing, I think is interesting because not a lot of mature, I think, business organizations really anchor on it. But it is a powerful tool for things like redundancies. Some organizations even starting to say, hey, like, what is this project and what business capabilities is it driving? to Sundar's point, if people run off, they get budget and they go run off and start running 40 different projects without thinking about those kinds of relationships, then you end up with a mess in the end. And I've used this also successfully in the sort of shadow IT space, right? So the business comes and says, hey, we need this new thing. And sometimes by saying, well, what are you actually asking for? Oh, you're asking for robotics process automation. Well, we already have something for that, right? And you can kind of head these things off at the pass and show some real value by avoiding spend or stopping these projects for building redundancies out in the wild.
Love that. Thanks for coming back. There's too much
thanks.
goodness there not to bring you back. Any reactions to that, Sundar?
Oh, it's spot on. I think that the more we can meet them where they are and just where they feel like we're enablers for them, we're helping them get to their goal, the more you're going to get that relationships and then the collaboration.
Awesome. Well, we're kind of defining ourselves at a natural wrap-up point here. Anything, even just from the last few minutes, Sundar, you want to highlight as we kind of take everyone home?
Well, I just wanted to say, it's wonderful to see some old friends, and it's also nice to just be part of this network. And Grant, kudos to you for the yeoman work and Brian for bringing this all together. So I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. It was an amazing conversation. And the idea we have 55 architects, chief architects across the organizations, all in the same place, helping each other move these kind of concepts forward is so fulfilling. If that sounds like you, a nice little lead in there, apply to join us, right? chiefarchitectnetwork.com, no cost, 501c3 nonprofit, and actually coming together in London in just a few months here in April. A little bit of an invasion. We'll probably have 40, 50 folks over there going after these kinds of concepts over a couple days, and that's a great way to learn. So again, no cost on these events, just an opportunity to connect with peers in a vendor-neutral, collaborative way. So Brian, any closing thoughts from you?
No, this has been really great. Really glad to have you on, Sundar, and thanks for sharing your wealth of knowledge about this topic. I think we've all got things we can take from this and go put into action, whether we're getting started or we've been on this journey for a while. So thank you for sharing with us, and it was great to have you today.
Awesome. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and thanks so much for spending a couple of minutes with us this afternoon.
Thank you.